Japanese word.
Okay, you know, Logan could just like subtitle it, you know, hold up subtitles.
Yeah, there you go. All right, can you guys hear us now? On the live chat. Sorry, I apologize, Craig. We're new system. I had to migrate to a new computer. So
yeah, no problem.
So yeah, I'll just cut this off on the audio, and everybody can think we're dorks at the beginning of this who watch the video, which they do anyway. So yeah, all right, Rick, you got to introduce yourself again.
Hey, Rick Lay, writer and pulp magazine collector.
All right, Pete, now you got to tell us about the Facebook group again.
So Pete Rawlik, writer and purveyor of fine filth. It's not as funny now, you know. But you know, no, I have a problem. I buy books, and looking at books and rummaging through bookstores relaxes me. But I find the craziest things. So I tend to bring them home, and if I don't want them, I put them up on my Facebook page. Maybe every 2 weeks I'll put stuff up. And it's a Facebook page for a whole bunch of people. If you have stuff you want to get rid of, it's called the Arkham Book Exchange. Send me a message. Don't be a crazy person. If you're pretty normal and like one of us, I'll invite you in, and you can.
Those two things are mutually exclusive. How can they be normal and one of us?
Yeah, well, you know, don't be a raving madman. So anyway.
Thank you, folks, for telling us that the sound was out, and I think we've fixed that problem forever now. So, Matt.
Hi, we have a prize this week. It's a good one. It's a copy of Weird Fiction Review from 2018. It's number 9. It's got a simulated Fantastic Four cover. These books have a little art gallery. They have fiction, criticism. They're great. So if you want to win this, send an email to ezineprizes@gmail.com and you put review in the subject heading. We will have a drawing to randomly select a winner in about 4 or 5 weeks.
Yep. ezineprizes@gmail.com. So let's talk to Craig, and I know that Pete has a lot of questions too. But before we get there, can you give us a little bit of your background and how you became a writer?
Well, I wanted to be a writer since I was 9 years old, and then through high school, I discovered Robert E. Howard and his fiction, super pulpy, purple prose, the whole 9 yards. I just absolutely loved it at the time, and
Rick just perked up.
Yeah, I grew up in the country on a farm outside a small town that was like an Andy Griffith type of town, and so but I was always this kind of creative mindset. So like I always felt like I was chafing. So reading fiction kind of took me somewhere else. And after a while, I wanted to be able to control that and provide it for other people. So I got really turned on by the idea of being a writer, and then spent the entire 90s basically writing novels and trying to get published with traditional publishing, which at the time was like being in a Kafka novel where you're invited to a party, you're not allowed to enter. And so I would just assembly line, you know, send these query letters to agents and publishers, and nothing happened. But finally something hit. This novel I wrote called Paranoia, which was about conspiracy theories, like what if they were true kind of thing. And something Chuck Palahniuk might have written while he was drunk on a bad weekend, is how I like to describe it. And you know, it did well enough that that small press ended up working with me again on a science fiction novel, The Great Planet Robbery, and then at the right place at the right time, which is 90% of success in this business. Having the right book at the right place at the right time. I wrote a zombie novel called Tooth and Nail, which was the first zombie novel that really imagined like a scenario where the military was fighting a zombie outbreak, and sort of started this whole thing in zombie fiction, and it exploded in sales. And then from there, I got in with Permuted Press, wrote 2 more zombie novels. They did extremely well, again, at the right place at the right time. And then from there, you know, you just start building up. And so I got an agent. I wrote a horror novel, Suffer the Children, which was sort of an apocalyptic vampire type of novel published by Gallery at Simon & Schuster. And then from there, I started doing a lot of self-publishing, these dime novel, World War II actioners and other stories. They sold very well. And
Yeah,
then
because you were getting into the era where you could do that by that time, I assume.
Yeah, exactly. I just needed to find a model where, I could publish it and there were no crickets. It was actual people engaging and so on. So I found this dime novel model that did in a really nice niche where I could have a lot of fun writing and I knew there were readers. And so that did extremely well. And then I hooked up with a new agent, got in with Hachette, which has the Orbit speculative fiction imprint. And I've done 3 novels with them. One of Us is a dark fantasy, a misunderstood monster novel cast as a Southern Gothic. Then Our War, which is an imagining of a Second American Civil War in the near future. And then The Children of Red Peak, which is a psychological horror novel about a cult.
Okay,
And
so
now I'm pitching them on a new novel and working on a new self-pub series. And so I've always got something on the go, and I'm a very lucky man to have these opportunities. And as long as they keep coming, I'm going to keep producing and doing what I love to do most.
yeah, you're keeping busy. I noticed at the end of Red Peak about One of Us. Is that book out yet then?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That
It came out after Red Peak or before?
One of Us came out 2 or 3 years ago, and then Our War came out 1 or 2 years ago, and then Children of Red Peak came out just recently. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Well, could you give us a spoiler-free synopsis of The Children of Red Peak, and then I'll let Pete join in with some questions.
Sure. The novel is about a group of people who grew up in an isolated religious group that eventually transitioned into becoming what we would consider a dangerous cult. And this cult, and after it imploded on a horrific last night, these people who grew up and were children at the time, they're now the survivors. And so we get to know them in 2 timelines. One is while they were children growing up in the group and how everything was nice and then it all went bad, and why it went bad. And then the other timeline is we see them as adults and they're coping with the trauma of what they suffered. And they're all feeling this siren call to go back to Red Peak to try and solve the mystery of what really happened to their families. And then when they get there, they have to make an ultimate choice.
Made me feel really old because the dates of when they were children are like 2002 and 2005, and I'm like, oh my god, it feels like yesterday,
Yeah, yeah, I know exactly how you feel.
Well, the 80s was only 20 years ago.
Yeah,
I know, you're right.
Right.
You're right. So yeah, go ahead, Pete.
So first of all, Children of Red Peak is a fascinating character study in trauma. And you've got, you present us 4 characters, but there's a 5th one, and all of them seem to think that they were doing okay.
Mm-hmm.
But we open with Emily's
Yes.
funeral.
Yes.
Who apparently had it all together.
Yes.
But then didn't.
Right.
And then most of the adult timeline is spent with these 4 characters crashing their lives.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what was the inspiration for that? Because it's really dark in places. You've got 4 characters who have developed very differently. Mm-hmm. They've chosen different ways to deal with their trauma. Mm-hmm. I mean, and one of them is very personal. He is a cult extractor. So, he hasn't left the life behind. He's just flipped aside.
Yes. So
how did you get there?
Yeah, well, I'm really fascinated with the idea. Years ago, I watched that movie. I know I'm butchering the title because I can never get it right. Marcy May Marlene. I think I got that right. Elizabeth Olsen's first role, about a young woman who escapes a cult. And one of the things I
All
love
right,
about
yeah.
it is how her behavior afterwards, we see her in the aftermath. And I love that while I was watching it, I kept thinking, wow, you can leave the cult, but the cult doesn't leave you. It makes its imprint on your behavior and your worldview. And I really liked that idea. And so these are people who are trying to cope not only with the trauma they experience, but also their loss of identity and worldview. They were raised to believe that this certain thing was going to happen, and it didn't happen. So another thing that inspired the novel was this whole idea of horrible things in horror novels having consequences. You know, one of my favorite books is horror novels is Kin by Keelan Patrick Burke. And and in that novel, we see the aftermath, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre type of thing has happened. We see this bloody girl stagger out of a cornfield. She's escaping, but now she's got to live her life, and her family has to cope with this, and everybody has to cope with this. I absolutely loved that. The whole idea that something terrible happens. Okay, but now what happens? What are the consequences of that? And it feels like a very grown-up novel. Those are the kind of TV shows I like to watch. Those are the kind of movies I like to watch. I love to be treated like a grown-up and say, things have consequences. What are those consequences? And you get so much story out of it. Something that's so almost overly familiar at this point. But now we're going to make it completely fresh by telling you what happens after. I really love that. So then I had to try and make this work for the children of Red Peak, which was challenging because I have these characters who are kids, and then you see them as adults. So what I did there, was I took the kids and gave them basically a dominant personality trait. And then I showed them so you see them as young kids, and then those personality traits develop as they go into their teen years, as you see in the past timeline. Mm-hmm. Oh, the novel, Matthew, was Kin by Keelan Patrick Burke. Yeah, just terrific book. So you see these kids with these dominant character traits, they're growing up with this. Now you see them as adults. Through the trauma is expressed as that dominant character trait sort of running amok and becoming a crutch. So if David when he's young, is sort of scared of everything because all these things are happening, all these big changes are happening in his life and he can't handle it, he hides a lot. He likes to withdraw and just feel so he can feel safe and process, and then he can engage. As an adult, he's now doing this and it's running amok. To the point where he hides from the world. His job, he treats it as a strength. His job is to help people escape and hide from cults.
Right, but in the process, he leaves his wife and kids.
Exactly. He's hiding so much. He's not present. And he's completely withdrawing from everyone, including his sister. He's withdrawing from his wife, and he's withdrawing from his kids. So we can see that these things, these traits become a run amok. They become coping mechanisms as a crutch. They see them as strengths, so they can say, look, I've got it together. Look, I made it work for me. But actually, it's a sincere flaw. So it worked for them as people, and it also worked for fiction because they have serious misbeliefs and flaws that have to be corrected.
David is distancing himself from his family, maybe unconsciously, but at the same time, he's, feels that he's being super protective of his kids,
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
so
right.
that this evil world out there that he knows about, he doesn't want them. He wants to protect them from it. And before Pete goes on, I just wanted to point out, this is not a spoiler, there were 5 survivors, if I remember correctly, all kids of this traumatic cult event. And then at the beginning of the novel, what brings them together is that one of them commits suicide.
Right.
So, yeah.
And like you said, she's the one who has her thing together.
Right.
The most, at least on the outside. And that's a common thing with trauma. I mean, I did a huge amount of research for this book to try and make it as realistic as possible. I didn't want scary eye, lasers coming out of the eyes, type of cult. I wanted it to be, and so I did a huge amount of research. And part of that research was how people cope with trauma. And a lot of times they try and put on this front, they convince themselves, I'm okay, everything's okay, but they're actually inwardly constantly fighting.
Right.
Well, and David and Angela arrive at the first compound, fleeing because their mother believes the end of the world is on its way
Right,
because of 9/11,
right.
and you got to get back in the good graces of God.
Yes. No pressure, right?
Yeah, and
So they're fleeing, a bad home situation and end up in this group that believes in good Christian living, no, low tech. We grow our own food. We resist outside influences. We're staying pure. We're going to take care of each other. We're all about the group. And the kids actually feel really safe there. They really like it. It has its dark side based on fear, but it also has its nice side based on love. And these two are in constant conflict, expressed through some of the leaders of the group. But generally, they kind of like it. However, there's a rigid belief system that the world is going to end, and they take this very seriously, and they have to live a certain way. They're like, I have the world's best insurance policy, and I'm going to read the fine print and do what it says because I want that insurance. And so that's what they're doing. And
Yeah,
so
Pete,
it's very rigid and it's very difficult. It's very extremely demanding, and it's a slippery slope that once this new information is introduced, the God's on a mountain waiting for them, and God has tests, then they have to make these choices, and it's a very slippery slope. And you can see how they would make, I'm going to get into heaven. Who cares if I do this test and it's horrifying? I'm going to get into heaven. They think they're going where they're going to be going. And so they'll do whatever it takes. And that's, for me, is the real horror, right? It's the horror of belief as a human trait, where we look at people. All of us have this capacity for it. It kept our species alive this long. We have to believe in things that we don't have evidence for. It's our imaginations. It's all this stuff it makes us human, but it's a two-sided coin. And on the other side of the coin is belief that runs amok can lead to really dangerous and horrifying behavior. And that's where the real horror in the novel comes from, where I think readers would read this and hopefully reflect on how close all of us are to this, and what choice would we make, right, in the same type of situation with the same choices they had.
Yeah, years ago, Pete, if you guys remember, we had a discussion about the shadow over Innsmouth, and why the hell are these people the way they are? Why they're doing what they're doing? And it's basically because Dagon brings them fish. There's a payoff. Remember that, Pete?
Yeah. And so, but here, and this is not a big spoiler, the compound that they're at originally really fulfills all their needs.
Mm-hmm.
They have food and water and family and housing.
Right.
And then we got to pick it all up and leave it all behind and basically go to a desert mountain.
Yes.
Where there's nothing.
Yes.
And wait for a sign.
Yes. It's not supposed to be easy. That's the thing,
It is a pilgrimage, and this is Reverend Peel, right? Who is very charismatic and has been right. And
Cult leaders usually are.
Well, yeah. So it's very easy to see how, well, look, he's the boss. He's been in charge. He's been right all the time.
Right.
Why would we not?
Yeah, a lot of, if not most, cult leaders are sociopaths. But the thing is, though, there's a very fine line between a cult and just basically church, right? It's really a cult they call them alternative religious groups. But they may believe in anything. They may be political, and they may believe in UFOs or whatever. But they have a belief system, and it's usually with a charismatic leader promoting it. And it's just different than the conventional Christianity and these other religions that we live with. And so there's nothing wrong with what they're doing. what makes them, what makes a cult is in the level of harm that they do. And so if you're hurting your members or you're hurting your community, there's a huge level of exploitation going on, then that would be considered a cult. So the idea about Jeremiah Peel, the Reverend, is he is a really likable character. I liked him while I was writing him. And I was, and this was a guy who wasn't going to make other people suffer without him suffering, right? Or if not more so, right? Which was also very interesting. So was he a sociopath, or did his experience on the mountain make him one? You know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah.
And to be clear, this is not the first time something has happened at Red Peak.
Right.
This is,
it has a history.
It's a
That
history.
really caught me by surprise. Yeah.
Yeah. And
yeah, the ending, the back cover says they're going to go back to Red Peak, so I can say that. But that, and you know that this is what it's all leading up to. But the ending, is itself, all is revealed, but there's still a curtain,
yes.
requiring an element of belief on the part of the reader. And that was intentional. Like, I wanted to do that so that the reader would inject themselves into their shoes and say, and inject their own belief into it. And what do they think?
The Great and Terrible Oz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can tag, go ahead, Pete.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
If I can tag team off Pete for just a second, I wanted to bring up a couple things. First thing I wanted to say was, the more I have a personal history with this that I won't bore everybody with, but I grew up in a cult and it's very familiar to this in a lot of ways. Very harmful place. And the more I read this book, the more I thought there were statements in this book that the average person just does not understand or know. And so either you have a personal experience with it, or you did one hell of a lot of research to delve into the minds of cult survivors, because I kept nodding my head sadly at lines that just rung true. So I'm wondering about that. Is that just intense research on your part? You've already mentioned you researched a lot.
Yeah, it was all the product of research. And then as a writer, what I would do is, say, well, I remember I experienced trauma back then, in some situation. How did that make me feel? How did that affect me afterwards? And then I would sort of borrow from my own experience, like, all writers do. But it was all from the framework of the research. And so I'm really, I'm glad and sad to hear you say that. Glad that you connected with it. Sad that you had that experience. But I didn't know. I'm you want to show. I write a lot of military fiction too, and geez, and Stuff for the Children, I wrote about a guy whose job was a garbage collector. I like to show respect
Right.
to my characters and to people who read, who can connect to those characters with similar backgrounds. And I want to at least try and get it right as much as I can. So, and it provides so much of a wealth of material for the story. It's just fuel for the story engine that you can just bonfire it. And it's just absolutely wonderful from a writing point of view, from a creation point of view. So I'm really very happy to hear you connected with it.
Well, if I remember correctly, Ernest Hemingway was very gratified to hear that his writing about his work about war was accurate. I remember reading about him in that regard. And then the other thing that comes to mind is Tom Clancy. Wow, research that had to go into that. So no, it's a huge compliment. Yeah, I nodded sadly at a lot of these lines, but it's if you didn't go through it yourself, it's an amazing amount of research and shows what a dedicated writer you are. So hopefully that's coming off as a compliment. So because it's meant that way.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't want to do the same old. Here's the evil cult leader on stilts, and with cartoon crazy eyes and all the whole, I just want, and the people in the cult are either calm and rational and want to get out, or they're part of the, their brain. I didn't want to do the typical, I just felt like it had been done before. And to me, it wasn't really true. Could be true in some cases, but there's so many of these groups where it's not like that. And so I wanted to really kind of peel away a more nuanced, layered view of cults. And
well, one more thing I want to
think
say
of
for
many
now and
different
then
kind
go
of,
over to
shape.
Pete is that I wrote down this line. One thing Beth missed about the family, speaking of the cult, was its sense of purpose. And you really nailed that one too, Craig, because I got out, over 30 years ago. And it was a horrible, horrible place. But at the same time, there's this shameful sense of when you're there, you quote unquote know what's right. You know what to do. You have a sense of purpose. And when you leave, I remember I left when I was 18, 19. I didn't know which end was up. I was suddenly thrust into this world and didn't have a purpose anymore,
Mm-hmm.
And I found it now, but that's very true to life, that cult survivors miss that sense of purpose, even if it was a terrible, terrible place to be, which in many cases it is.
There was an analysis I saw that suggested that when these fringe religions send people out into the community to recruit, they send them knowing they're going to fail. So it reinforces their belief that they are separate and distinct and special.
Yeah. Very special. That's one of the hooks of a cult, is that you're special, unlike the rest of humanity.
But they do want new members.
They do want new members,
Yeah.
but
there's a nice, useful byproduct of rejection.
Yes.
And the angrier, the better. Yeah.
Yeah, the rejection makes you welcome back and happier to be back into the community.
Yeah.
And it reinforces your part of that. So
yeah, a lot of people who leave cults, Mike, I don't know how much reading you've done on this, but it really, and what you experienced, but from my research, a lot of people, when they leave, they tend to become vulnerable to people like cult extractors. They're vulnerable in terms of the tactical, not the strategic. It's really hard to get them to say everything that I was living was wrong, and what was being done to me was wrong. They tend to get mad, like they always make me do the dishes, and that's not fair because the principle is equality, but that's not equal, so that's not fair. So I'm tempted to get out now, and that is kind of like how they end up leaving. It's so hard for them to get past the worldview of that it is basically right, or is basically wrong rather, everything that they were experiencing. And as a result, it's like incredibly stressful for them, and they need tons of psychological support afterwards to be able to, really get back on their feet, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, and it's a process. You quote unquote know the secrets of the universe.
Yeah.
And then you don't. You realize that you didn't the whole time.
Yeah.
When I grew up, I knew, I didn't believe, I knew that I would die when I was 17.
Yeah.
That was very scary. But the other kids that were with me were in the same boat, so at least I had that.
The kids in the book, the same thing. I hope you were able to. I'm going to find myself saying, I hope you were able to connect with really horrible things.
No, I know what you mean. But it's okay.
I hope you were able to find that credible. Let's put it that way. That because these kids, they're 14 when they're given the call to go to the desert and wait for God. And when they get there, they're excited, but they're like, oh, I'm not going to get to live the only life I knew I was going to be allowed to live. And they do a lot of speculating. And is there ice cream in heaven? Like, is there love in heaven? Can I kiss a girl or a boy in heaven? Like, how are we going to live? And what does this all mean? But they just took it for granted that, yeah, this is happening.
Yeah.
And then they had these rebellious thoughts and feelings like, well, maybe I just wanted to wait another week, but oh no, I can't say that to God. I have to be worthy. And so it's really torturous, especially when that, the end is not, like that moment is now here, that all those belief systems are leading up to this big event. Now that event's here, then it all comes crashing home. And it's psychologically, mind bending, I think, especially for kids.
Chelsea Goodwin in the chat, Pete, just said, wow, I get it. That loss of certainty from cult belief is the essence of cosmic horror. Did I get that right? I wrote yes. It's not quite that simple as my yes that I put in there, but it's very close, So.
Yeah, there's that aspect of it, but there's also just the aspect of many of us, I think on the call, we're probably raised with a conventional religion. The odds are in favor of that. And so
Sure.
we grew up like taking certain things for granted. So I don't know what my relationship is with God today, but there's a God, or if there isn't a God, there could be, there's all this basic residual, if not outright imprint from that upbringing.
Pete.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, so all right. So we're leaving the compound. We're going to the mountain. We're going to the desert. There is resistance. Even there are people that don't want to go. And the kids voice their doubts even up until the last few minutes. But at the same time, in your writing, you're flipping us from this group of people that is mostly going willingly, but with the kids expressing doubt, to a small group of adults 10 years in the future who have decided that they have to go back.
Right.
And you juxtapose those two travels in a very skillful manner. It's a little stroke of literary genius to put those two events parallel to each other like that.
Well, I appreciate that, and the quickest reason that I would offer up is obviously for tension building.
It works well, yes.
And you want to, it's almost like peeling an onion for the adults, and so the more. Every time you go back into the past and you dig into how the kids grew up and then what they were going through once they got to the desert, you appreciate more and more the adults and the adults kind of hitting the wall and realizing that they have to go back. It becomes a rational choice. Like the reader's like, yeah, you got to go back. There's no other way.
Yeah, it almost creates a sort of the sense that the kids themselves don't have a complete memory of everything that happened until they start the journey back.
Right. Or they carry the memory, but they have not evaluated it from an adult perspective.
Also, there's some each of them putting together other parts with the other people.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, I was locked in the cellar. I don't know what happened. But you were out there.
Right.
So,
right.
You can fill in my gaps and I can fill in your gaps.
Right.
And then we might have a story.
Right.
But even then we don't.
Right. And it took the kids as adults, really so long to even compare notes on some of the wild things they saw the last night, because who knows if is anybody going to believe you, or
right.
It's just, but once they start comparing notes and, then it becomes a lot more compelling, and the there's more a sense of revelation for them,
Right.
that they are going to be confronting something.
And that might actually be, in my mind, one of the reasons why Emily kills herself,
Mm-hmm.
is that she can't
Mm-hmm.
complete the story.
Right.
She doesn't have all the parts.
Yes.
She can't. Once she starts thinking about it, as the 10-year anniversary approaches, she can't rationalize it
Mm-hmm.
because she doesn't know.
Or, yeah, exactly. And one of the horrifying possibilities is that, maybe they were right. Maybe the
Yes.
Reverend was right.
The
And-
other horrifying thing, though, Craig, is that Emily has a loving husband and
Yeah.
children. The guy breaks down at her funeral when he's trying to talk to her.
Yeah.
Even though she had all this,
Yes.
she still committed suicide because inside she could not escape. One character says, and I quote, "It's still in me." And I think all 5 kids and grown kids feel that way.
I mean, if the person who could have probably done the most here is Beth, the psychologist. If she could have gotten them all together in some sort of horrible group therapy, and
Very horrible.
then they could have at least processed to a point.
Yeah, but to an extent, that's the
whole story. Yes,
that's the trip to go back is
Right.
she's presenting as a psychological cathartic experience.
Right.
Confront the source of your trauma, but really a part of her's thinking,
Well,
I might have been left behind.
They all have their doubts, and that's and they're all expressing them in different ways.
And that is the psychological horror to me. And some readers took exception to that, like, oh, so cult leaders are all right. And it's like, no, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that and this is a train of thought. I lost my train of thought earlier, but this is what I was getting to, this whole idea of cosmological
We do that to
horror.
guests a lot, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, no, it's just you get nervous. But the whole idea of cosmological horror coming from any relationship with the divine. And a lot of that's sourced for me, in a reading of Abraham in Genesis with
Yes.
And you can see that quote at the beginning in the book, and it informs a lot of some of the character perspectives. This whole idea that Abraham is told by God to take his son Isaac, to bind him on a mountaintop, and take a knife and sacrifice him and burn the body as a burnt offering, which is what they would do back then.
And the Bible paints Abraham as such a great guy for doing what God wanted. I would have flipped God off and said, forget it.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
and
I just
so
have to
my-
digress a second.
Sure.
Benjamin Britten wrote a requiem mass after World War II because 50 million people, mostly from Europe, died. And there's this duet for the tenor and the bass soloists. And they're talking about the myth of Abraham. But the end of the story is, and then Abraham slew his son and half the seed of Europe one by one. So he completely flipped that over. So Abraham just went through with it and killed everyone else too.
Yeah.
That was how he thought about the war.
Which is exactly my question. What if God didn't say stop? Would Abraham have done that? And so I thought, well, first of all, what does it say that God asked him to do this? And B, and that we think it's such a great story about obedience and faith, and which shows how ingrained things are.
Mhm.
And then the other thing is, what if that story was told from Isaac's point of view? How would he tell that story? And that became a lot of the inspiration for the book I wrote.
So
I have to throw this out here because I often say that if you should read far more than one nonfiction book in your life, obviously. But if you only read one, it should be The Demon Haunted World by Carl Sagan, because it's a book about belief, the dangers of belief, and that and how far it can be taken. You know, the Salem witch trials, they had a belief that these women were witches. You know, and you know, the saying that, well, people have the right to believe whatever they want to believe, but do they really? If it's going to harm somebody else, you know, and so I would encourage people. Yeah,
Who has been sorry that the Aztec religion went out of fashion?
right, exactly. Yeah, no, I don't miss those guys at all. So it's a very good
you
book to
bring
read.
up such a wonderful point, though, which is the Salem witch trials, for
Mhm.
example.
Yeah, and that's
They,
just one of many. Yeah,
yeah, so they did evil, the people that went to those women, but in their mind, they were doing the purest thing they could do, and it may, even if it's hard to picture them laughing and saying "aha" and lighting a fire. There to burn them at the stake. There, it was probably painful to watch and to participate in and to have anything to do with. Now, I'm taking out the possibility of, I want so and so's land, or I just don't like so and
sure.
so, or that woman rejected me, that kind of thing. I'm talking about pure religious belief, and they were very, very religious. That in their minds, they were doing the purest, greatest thing they could absolutely do, but they were actually doing evil. And
I think the illustration
that to me is a source of cosmological horror, if not psychological.
Oh yeah, and it when Carl Sagan died, someone asked his wife, Anne Druin, Carl Sagan said one time, and I'm going to paraphrase this badly, that I would love to believe in heaven, that I'm going to meet my loved ones, and we're going to be, joyously together forever. But I've never seen any evidence that supports this, only anecdotal, only faith, which is not evidence. So after he died, someone asked his wife, didn't Carl want to believe? And Anne Druin said, no, Carl didn't want to believe. He wanted to know. So yeah, I'm speaking for myself, you may disagree, but I just think there's so many dangers in belief. I'll believe the moon's made out of green cheese if you prove it to me, So anyway, Pete, you got some more questions?
Well, so I want to go back. We were talking about Abraham and Isaac, and I want to go back and tell you about a story I have in my trunk. And it is about the human race trying to move into space, and no matter what they do, they cannot get their faster than light drive to work. And after decades of trying to get it to work, everything says it should work. They can't. It can't work. It won't work. Aliens show up. They come down and they start taking our resources, and they do this, that, and the other thing. And they're like, look, human beings are like, well, look, why can't we get our warp drive to work? Why can't we go faster than light? Our drive looks just like yours. And they say, oh, yeah, we have this story about Bram and Zach, where Bram was asked by God to take his child up into the mountain and sacrifice him. So, oh, we have that same story. He said, yeah, we said no. And we are the chosen people of God. And therefore, our technology works.
So it was a test. God wanted Abraham to say no, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice.
And yeah, I have to go back. I think I need to go back and rewrite that. I think it still has something to say.
I really, as much as I've thought about that story, Pete, thanks, because I've never thought about that. It's a fictional story as far as I'm concerned. But what if the true test was, don't tell me yes. What kind of an asshole are you that you would murder your own son just because I said so?
Yeah.
So Pete,
the idea being is that if you say no and establish yourself as an adult species,
yeah,
say that there are lines we won't cross, then You are
Yeah,
the elders of the universe.
the movie The Box.
Yes.
Remember they asked the Martian guy, how do we stop this? And he goes, well, that should be obvious. Stop pushing the button.
Yeah.
So if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen the movie The Box, you really should. It's great.
Okay, so Pete, I may get the author wrong here. I remember reading a story, it was like 40 years ago, and it might have been by Heinlein. And I don't know if it was called The Dream Snake or The Death Bird or something like that, about how this, it's set at the beginning of time, and someone is meeting with the snake saying, what is going to happen to you is unspeakable, but you must do it and persevere. And eventually it comes down to a point in history where humanity realizes that the snake was their friend.
Mm-hmm.
And so he reaches out to touch the snake and says, friend. And the snake says, you have no idea how long I have waited for this.
Yeah, I've seen this movie, Al Pacino. I'm a fan of man. God's an absentee landlord.
It's like, I don't really, it's sort of a kind of similar idea,
Yeah.
but I don't remember the name of the story. It was ages ago.
Yeah, I love that. I love that take on the devil that, no, I love humanity, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, my dad's an asshole. I love you guys.
In a sense, actually, the devil, at least in its portrayal in film, is a little less scary because the devil's always portrayed as a person. You can have a relationship with this person.
Right.
And with God, it's always like, there's always some sort of like pretzel logic to be like, yeah, half the people in the world are dead, but we saved the unborn child and now God's happy. And he's, you know, it's like, it's so much rationalization on behalf of like an omnipotent being that can stop all this instantly doesn't, you know?
Right.
And
yeah, or like when a car accident happens.
and just the idea, God, like, to me, it represents more the infinite, you know, like you're looking into this infinite abyss or an infinite something, and that is God. I find that scarier in a way than Al Pacino.
Yeah, exactly. And let me point out to anyone, I've had several people in the live chat say they've got to read this book, and many more people will be listening to this later than watch on the live chat. But
well, I certainly hope they do, and I hope they enjoy it. Thank you. Anybody out there decides to read the book, I thank you.
It's a good book. I got a lot out of it. And let me point out, this is definitely a horror book, and it's, you know, a psychological horror book. But then you get near the end, there are some, oh my God, there are some horrific scenes, absolutely horrific. So yeah, if you're wondering if you're buying a horror book or not, you are.
Yeah.
And I see the cosmic horror in it as well.
Yeah, it's cosmic horror rooted, firmly rooted in sort of Judeo-Christian mythology. It's not a Lovecraftian book,
no,
in that sense, which is, you know, this is something that we have to be. I'm having great debates with people about, is that there's cosmic horror, and then there's lots of different types of cosmic horror. Lovecraftian cosmic horror is just one branch. There is
probably the most visible, so we associate it as the standard.
Right.
Would you agree?
You know, Dean Koontz, The Taking.
Mm-hmm.
About the rapture.
Is a great cosmic horror novel about the rapture, and this falls into that same sort of space.
Yeah, but even then, it was like, it's okay because it's God.
Right.
You know, if
yeah, he always gets to get out of jail free card. If there's a car accident and 4 people are in the car and you know, 3 adults and a child, the 3 adults die and the child lives. It's a miracle. You know,
this is great.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna get in trouble for this.
I know we are. We get in trouble every week. What are you talking about?
What else? What are you working on now?
Well, I'm working on some pitches for Bradley Engler. He's my absolutely wonderful editor at Orbit. I totally love working with him. This is a guy who always takes my work and he's like, instead of like slashing and burning and rewrite this and do this, he's more like, hey, I want you to tease this out more. I love this. Your book could be the next X if you can hit these points. And I'm just like, just give it back to me. I'm gonna do whatever you want. I mean, he really knows how to get the most out of me as a writer and to be a leader. It never feels difficult with him. He's just absolutely wonderful to work with, and he's got a really interesting sense on, a literary take on horror. So some of the books I write tend to be a little bit more on the literary side than some other horror books that are maybe more, straight up commercial or sensational.
Well, and let's be clear here. With Children of Red Peak, it's only the last 30 or 40 pages that pushes it into anything supernatural.
Yeah, correct. And
Possibly
I know that has
supernatural, which I
frustrated
love.
some readers, and that's just how it goes. I mean, so it's a slow burn book, and it's a lot of character and a lot of a character study of trauma with the roots in this cult, but then also the cult rooted in a mystery and its disappearance rooted in a mystery. And and then it takes a while for these things to be peeled like an onion, and then they start to break open. Absolutely.
But it has to be that way for the ending to mean anything. Here's the cover of the book, Children of the Red Peak, for those who are watching. And for those who are not, that's fine. The title, Children of Red Peak by Craig DiLouie. I've got some blurbs on the back I'd like to read in case you're on the fence. A genuinely unsettling psychological horror novel, intense, compulsive, thought-provoking, and highly recommended. That's by David Moody, author of the Autumn series. And then Richard Chismar, who I really respect, says gripping, thought-provoking, and suspenseful. And there's more, but I won't keep reading them. It's a very good book.
Yeah, I was so grateful that Richard Chismar read it and reviewed it. I was very lucky.
So I have a question, because this being the era that it is, are you looking into other media, like feelers out, like for like films or TV shows, or are you at liberty to say?
From your lips to God's ears, man. I mean, of course. Yeah, totally. I would love to see my stories adapted in any other media. Absolutely, I'm all for it. My works have been optioned. The Stuff for the Children probably came closest. It was optioned by a Toronto-based production company, but it was too dark in that case. So the people loved the idea, but the money people just thought it was too dark and a little bit too bleak, and so they couldn't get the funding for it, which I was surprised by. But
I think in the hands of the right person, the Children of Red Peak would make a great one-off Netflix, Hulu, or Amazon Prime series.
I think
to
it's actually
squeeze it into a movie
most...
would be. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I interrupted you. But
I was just going to say, to squeeze it into a movie would really just ruin it, I think.
Yeah, I would love to see it as some type of, like a Netflix adaptation would be music to my ears. But the book came out right in the middle of the COVID pandemic, so it's not, things are happening real slow.
Yeah.
In
the meantime, you're doing what you love,
and
though.
even on a good day, getting your work adapted is like, a wind going through a junkyard and leaving behind an airplane you can fly to your hopes and dreams. I mean, it's almost impossible.
I'm gonna have to write that down later.
Book publishing is, and I don't want this quoted to me, because I think I've heard this somewhere before, but like the whole idea that book publishing is no, yes. And Hollywood is very yes, no, right? So, and I've been there before. I've been had all these great meetings, and it just, everybody's happy and loving the work and loving you as an author. And then suddenly it's like, okay, are we actually going to do this? No, not.
Yeah.
So I just sort of kind of, just for my own sanity, I sort of put it out of my head. I let my agent handle it, which I'm lucky to have him do that. And he works with, you know, creative artists, and you know, he works with, what is it? You know, United Talent Agency. That's who he works with. And they handle the rights for that. And so you know, it's just something I put out in my head. And if it ever happens, I would consider it like winning a lottery and I didn't know I had the ticket, you know, kind of.
In the meantime, you're doing what you love. And if that
Yeah,
happens,
absolutely.
it happens.
And you know, where
yeah.
I'm branching out into other media is really to look at other publishing platforms. So I'm doing a lot, like I said, on Kindle and with audio. I'm doing all my own audiobooks now, working with great narrators like R.C. Bray and Garrett Michael Brown. And then they sort of take on a life of their own, the self-pub. Like I wrote a 2-part, this little mini series about a war, you know, a carrier aviator in the near future fighting a war with China, then fighting a war with North Korea. And these 2 books were picked up by Blackstone just for the audio. And so they're doing the audio, and then I'm publishing paperbacks and the ebook. So it was really cool to be able to do that. And so, you know, I found myself, you know, being small press, then large press, traditional, then now I'm into self-pub, and now it's sort of hybridizing even between those 2.
It's funny. A friend of mine, I was about to say this, and I didn't even realize he was watching, and then he texted on the live chat. I don't keep up with most of the kids I grew up with, but several I do. And I told them I was doing this show today, and I sent them the link to the book and to the show. And my friend Larry said, I've already, I downloaded the audio book. He told me that a few hours ago. And then on the live chat, he said, just started the Audible format of the book today, barely into it, but already loving it. I want to say some lasting thoughts about the book, Craig, just on a personal level. You really did do your research. I mean this in the nicest way, that when I was reading this book, it really hit home, and I cried several times reading the book. I can't remember the last time I threw a book, and threw your book across the room. Not because it's bad, because it hit me, you know, and then I went and got it and kept reading. So if I can structure that as a compliment, it is, because you really got inside the minds of those who have been in a cult and how they have to deal with it later.
And if you remember, Mike,
yeah,
you sent me this to read, and I told you that you had to pick up a copy and read it because it would hit home.
yeah. There's a couple of things in here, like new members were love bombed. And I'm thinking, how the hell does this guy know about this? I remember when I was 6, my parents up and moved 800 miles to this cult, and my parents really liked this one Christian song. I can't remember what it was, and I don't care. But the cult leader had made sure that when we walked into that service, the musical folks were playing that song, you know. So there was love bombing right at the beginning. And then another statement, a couple of other statements, was the hardest thing about leaving a cult wasn't leaving, but making sure it has left you. And then Beth, I think, said this: strange to realize that if she hadn't suffered, she'd be a different person. In a sense, she wouldn't exist. And this is something that's really, really bothered me all my life. You know, so much in our lives is out of our control. You know, we can control some things, but there's so much we can't control. And all that is to say that you wrote a very, very good book that hit home really well. So I'm sorry for throwing your book, but it was for a good reason.
It's a great reason. Thanks for that. I appreciate it.
So,
I have,
yeah,
a,
any more questions, guys?
I have a question.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that Robert E. Howard was an early influence, but you've obviously moved beyond that. So, who are your later literary influences?
Oh, geez. Everybody I read, like I'm so much more eclectic now, and every author I read teaches me something. I just reread Blood Meridian, Cormac McCarthy's classic novel. Reminded me about rhythm and language. Every time I read John Skip, I'm reminded of where I learned something about the connection between horror and humor.
John, he is such a nice guy.
So yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, look, Skip's awesome. And so so every time I read a book, I learn. I hope I don't learn what not to do. For that author's sake. But I often learn about something I can do a little bit better.
You mentioned Blood Meridian.
So I would say influence. But the bad thing is, the more my writing career really took off at a certain point. Like I say, I've been a very lucky man that way to have the opportunities I've had. But back before all this, I was a very eclectic reader, and now I find myself reading what I write. So if I'm writing a novel about cults, I'll read every single book I get my hands on cults, and keep a notebook until the notebook is just like I'm on to the next notebook. And then I just became fiction, nonfiction, every single thing I can find on the subject. I know way more about carrier aviation now than I thought I ever would. And I'll be that obnoxious guy you won't want to watch the Top Gun sequel with, because I'll be like, oh, that's not realistic. I actually had a Top Gun instructor consulting me on the novels, and like that's how far I go with this. I really want to. But the question that starts every one of my books is, what if this were real? What if this were true? What would that look like? And and then I go from there. So that's great, because it makes what I write, I think, a little bit richer and feel more true. So that whatever the fantastic is in a story becomes even more fantastic. But at the same time, it's also a little bit of a downside, because I don't get to be as eclectic a reader as I.
Okay, so
as I
question:
used to
should
be.
I ever rewatch Blue Thunder with you? Can helicopters fly upside down?
Not if, yeah, it wouldn't be much fun, probably. But the same thing with submarines. I was researching World War II submarines. I read like 20 books on submarines and manuals of submarines and like the whole 9 yards. It was really something. But the payoff is you get that letter from somebody saying, "Oh, I thought you were a sailor. I thought you served on submarines," because I did for 30 years, and the book sounds you basically got it right, and it's
Well,
like, well, great.
If that's your payoff, Craig, I got to tell you, I guess it's sad and good at the same time. Reading this, I honestly thought, man, this guy's a cult survivor.
Yeah.
So yes, you're a hell of a researcher,
Well,
and a hell of a writer. So
thank you, appreciate that.
So you mentioned Blood Meridian. Are you a Laird Barron fan? Makes me think of Laird's work.
No, I'm not. Haven't read much of his work yet, but I intend to.
Oh gosh, yeah, you should. You just strike me as the type of person who would enjoy it.
Okay, that's a good recommendation. I mean, there's so
Yeah,
many
you could
choices.
start with maybe the Imago sequence. Probably is a good place to start.
Okay, I was recently recommended to Ronald Malfi.
Oh, absolutely.
Actually, I saw him on a post, and then I saw him on your Facebook page. And
yeah,
I
he's
ended
going
up
to be on the
getting
show.
And I'm going to give that a shot.
Yeah, Mr. Cable's really good book.
Okay.
And man, Ronald Malfi is prolific, man.
Yeah, he's got a lot of work.
Yeah,
for sure.
He's got a lot out there.
Yeah.
So, all right. Any more questions for Craig, guys? Pete? All right. Well, what we usually do now, Craig, is we talk about a lot of of geek stuff, and we tell the guest, horror related news and so forth. And we tell the guests, you're welcome to stay and you're welcome to leave. So, if you got writing to do or anything like that. But I do want to say that I really appreciate you coming on the show, and it's been wonderful talking with you.
Well, right back at you. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to have this conversation, and that a lot of your fans came to listen in, and Peter and Matt and Rick, thanks a lot, you guys as well. So I just want to say thanks very much. I think I am going to step off because I have work being done on faucets and a new bunk bed for my son being installed upstairs, and then dinner for the kids. So I think I am going to sign off, but I just wanted to say thanks again.
All right, thanks for being on the show, and I'll send you a note when the audio is up on iTunes and Spotify and so forth. So
fantastic.
All right, thanks a lot, Greg.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Greg.
All right. Well, thanks, guys.
I would like actually to
No.
bring up one topic because I could potentially use audience help on this. We were just talking about this prior to the show starting. Do you all remember Sarah Bardi, the Italian artist?
Mhm.
She's really quite good. There's a Kickstarter for a tarot where she did the art. It's called the Eldritch Tarot. And the major arcana is like Cthulhian themed. It's quite beautiful. So I'm thinking about just posting a list of all the different Lovecraftian tarots that I know about. So I could use some help. If you have any tarot decks in mind that are Lovecraftian themed and you want to tell me about them, you can either direct message me on Facebook, or you could also send it to ezineprizes@gmail.com. Just send me an email about it. I'm going to be doing this in the next, month or so.
All right.
We should point out that set that Sandra's done is an expansion of the one she did a few years ago.
Yeah.
We only had 20 cards. This you get the whole tarot deck. You get the
it's gorgeous.
Four of Swords and things like that.
Like they're tentacles. Like that's one of the minor. Well, that's one of the minor arcana. But it's beautiful art.
Right,
Yeah, it is. She gave me a tarot deck at a con a few years ago. It's just, she's really talented.
I have to take a 2-minute plug. Oscar Rios' Golden Goblin Press has a Kickstarter that ends in 4 hours.
Oh, okay.
Terror of the October Nomicon. It has made its primary goal, which is to produce a book of new role-playing scenarios, and it has made its secondary goal, which is to add one of those scenarios. Its next stretch goal, which is only less than $1,000 away, is a book of stories, and including a new Herbert West story by me.
Ooh,
So
nice.
yes, it's Golden Goblin does some great work. They do some great fiction production, and I'm really happy to work with them.
All right. So people need to Google Kickstarter and say the
Terror of the October Nomicon.
I have I've posted it on the eZine Facebook page as well as in the YouTube chat.
Oh, all right. Thanks. Okay. Terror of the October Nomicon. And if you're listening to this tomorrow, it's too late. So don't worry about it. What you're not too late for is, I'm sorry, Pete, were you done?
No, I'm done. Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. Michael Sisko has a new book out, which is always of note. It's called Anti-Societies from Grimscribe Press. I don't know. Anti-Societies is a collection of 10 stories about isolation, what it does to people and what isolated people do to each other and themselves. An ominously quiet town, a haunting young adult novel from the turn of the century, 2 starving captives frozen in agony, a young boy from a doting family, a succession of portraits of people trapped in their own identities, some of whom insist on their own ideas because they would not have nothing at all without them. People for whom being seen by another is terrifying. So this is a collection from Michael Sisko, and I think probably anyone listening to me knows what an immensely talented writer Michael Sisko is. So yeah, just Google Anti-Societies, all one word, Grimscribe Press. They're putting out some really great stuff lately.
Yeah, well, if the name sounds familiar, they're the ones that published Vastarian.
Right. John Paget. Yeah.
But if you have him on to talk about it, he has to do it in the voice of Werner Herzog.
Yes, exactly. What I really want is a debate between Michael Sisko's Werner Herzog and John Langen's
German Godzilla.
German Godzilla. Yes. They could debate philosophical ideas
Anything.
or something.
They could debate anything. I'd be entertained.
Oh my God. Let's see here. Oh, here's a new book. This guy's going to be on the show in a few months. Whisper Down the Lane by Clay McLeod Chapman. Remember the Satanic Panic, guys?
No, I don't have
in the
any
80s?
memory of that at all.
What?
I don't have any memory of that at all.
That's because you've suppressed them.
Yeah.
You've suppressed the memories.
So here's the funny thing is, my first time to play D&D was in a church basement.
Anyway, it's available now. Actually, Sean Hamill, author of The Cosmology of Monsters, book Stephen King really liked. Sean Hamill and I did actually already interview Clay on a Patreon podcast last week. So if you're not a Patreon, this is the kind of stuff you can get for only $5 a month. So that's pretty minuscule. But we will have an interview with him down the road for everybody to listen to. I will say this, and I have Victor's permission to say this. Victor LaValle is going to be on the show on October 3rd.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I haven't put it on the calendar yet, but I will later on today. Oh, okay. Yeah. I said, I told him a while back, thanks for becoming a patron. And he said, I listen to the show regularly. Seems only right to actually support it in some way. So be like Victor LaValle, because Victor's cool. Just Google Lovecraft eZine Patreon, or in the show notes, I've got a link to it as well. So you get a lot of extra stuff for not very much.
You know, I really need a Victor LaValle short story collection.
You do, yeah. Yeah. So how was the 13th floor? For those who don't know, Matt does movie night for anyone who's interested. You don't have to pay for this. Every Saturday night at 8 Central, right?
Yeah, so what we do is we will about 8:15 p.m. Central Time, we'll open up the room on Cast. So you have to download the application Cast and join the group eZine Movie Night. I've lately been playing an episode of the BBC's Whisperer in Darkness. We're on like episode 6, I think. At 9 o'clock, we'll start a movie. And
9 Central.
Yeah, that you can either participate in the group chat or just watch the film. And usually we have about 8 to 10 participants, and they're pretty cosmopolitan. We have people from Japan, the UK, and Canada, as well as the US.
Okay. So did they enjoy the 13th floor last night?
Oh yeah, it was. It's a very intriguing movie. It turns out I was a little into it. I realized, I had seen this before. But the idea is really just sort of fascinating. And here's the story. I don't remember if it was Ramsey Campbell. I think it was Ramsey Campbell, but it could have been Stephen King, who was like talking about something about the nature of reality. And he said, it's like someone came, if I got the story wrong, correct me, but like some lady came up to him afterwards, says, no, you don't understand. We're riding on the back of a giant turtle. And that turtle is also riding on the back of a bigger turtle. And
Turtles all the way down.
yeah, it's turtles all the way down. She says, it's like, he says, what's after that? She said, no, you don't get to do that. It's turtles all the way down. And that's what I thought about when I was watching this flick.
Well, do not watch the trailer if you haven't seen the 13th floor. There's a real, I'm not even going to say anything except that there's a note written to someone, and it's not, the person who reads it, it's not intended for him. Let's put it that way. And I probably said too much already. Did you guys see The Power yet? Bridget and Melissa were talking about that.
I haven't. I just watched Synchronic this morning, 5
It
o'clock.
wasn't any good.
What?
It wasn't any good, I said.
I did not like Synchronic.
I didn't either. Thank you.
I thought it was okay.
That's it. It's okay.
Yeah, these are the guys that did The Endless. This
Yeah.
is some kind of half-assed time travel movie.
Which you like.
Well, yeah, I like time travel movies, and I hated this movie. The only good part of the movie was when Anthony Mackie goes, "Wow, the past really sucks."
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, it's funny because we were driving someplace last night, and my wife said, I really wish I could have gone back, and I'd been born in the 50s, and I could have seen the rise of rock and roll. That would have been the cool thing. And I'm like, yeah. And you couldn't have bought a car or a house or have a credit card or, and all
Yeah.
the attention and, this, that, and the other thing. And you have the Vietnam War and the Korean War to look forward to. And she's like, all right, never mind.
Good old days weren't as good as you think, especially if you weren't white,
Or a man.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so the movie The Power, which I think I'm going to watch tonight as soon as the sun sets, is set in 1974 in a hospital during the rolling blackouts in England, right? Is that right? Have you guys seen this yet?
No.
Well, that I haven't either. So that sounds like a great setting. And Bridget and Melissa said it was great. And we talked about the other day about, and you guys agreed with me that hospitals at night can be very spooky. So there's that. Here's another hospital movie that I watched with Danielle some years ago. It's a 2005 movie starring Callista Flockhart of Ally McBeal. Don't let that stop you. The movie is called Fragile. And that's a damn creepy movie too. And now please don't come back to me and say Fragile wasn't scary if you watched it at 1 p.m. Because maybe it wasn't. We watched Fragile like at 10 o'clock at night, and Danielle didn't want to go into let's just say she was freaked out. So those are two suggestions. I've seen Fragile, I haven't seen The Power, but I trust Melissa and Elizabeth. Let's see what else we got. All right, so I wish I could show this, but I can't. So I'm just going to tell you about it. You guys know about it, but I don't know that most of the audience will. So Kat Pulver, Joe's wife, has been posting some Facebook memories. She posted a picture of several pictures. There's a picture of Pete and I on, I believe, April the 15th, 2014 at the, was it the film festival, Pete?
H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival in Portland, Oregon.
Right. All right. So we were sitting there. I'm wearing a black t-shirt and jeans, which I frequently do. It's the nerd code. Anyway, another picture shows me and a bunch of other people. I'm sort of in the forefront left, and I'm wearing a tan button-down shirt, and I'm talking to Dennis Wheeler and Joe. And then I looked in the back right, and I saw me, my exact body style, which isn't Schwarzenegger shaped, unfortunately. Goatee, I blew this up as much as I could. Jeans and black t-shirt, And I'm putting this out there, begging people to say, no, this was me. It looks exactly like me. And Kat's looking at her. And I think she was going to go, yeah. And then she's like, oh, he really has a point. So, yeah.
And somebody commented on that. It's like Pete Rawlik and Adam Scott Glancy, who I am often mistaken for Scott, and he is often mistaken for me, apparently.
Well, who else looks like me that was there? I know what Occam's razor is and everything, but this is weird.
It was Mick Davis. You didn't meet him?
Well, I know it wasn't Danny Williford, so who Facebook friend who actually very much looks like me. He's like 2 years older. So yeah.
I would think everybody in the world who has a beard has a double somewhere.
Could be.
That skews a large portion of your face. And when I was, I briefly went to graduate school at Brown University. There were two guys who looked exactly alike, who had glasses and a beard. And God, if I couldn't tell them apart.
Yeah, but the thing is, Rick, I'm going by the hair and the body style. You see me, the other me in the black t-shirt in the back.
Yeah.
You see from the side, you see my right side, and you barely see the goatee. Just
it's more the way that the two of you stand.
Exactly.
And it's like when I was whenever I travel, and it's been a while, but I can tell Americans, right? They walk differently. They stand differently. It's just something, and that person stands like you.
Yeah.
And that was, you're right. It is kind of freaky.
And dresses like me.
And has your hair color and your body shape and your head shape.
And my goatee.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not going to leap to the supernatural. I do think I told an old friend once that it's okay to say, I don't know, when you come across something weird, but damn if this isn't weird.
So we were, like I said, my wife and I were driving someplace yesterday and we passed this car and she looked over, I was driving and she was in the passenger seat. She looked over at this car and she said, oh, it's one of your people. I'm like, what? So like, how do you know? She says, oh, they're wearing a black shirt. They got long, dark hair, unshaven goatee. It's not trimmed. It's your people.
Neck beard? Any neck beard going on?
Yeah, there was.
I say that because, especially during the pandemic, I've not been working on my beard.
I just took all this off yesterday because I was coming on the show tonight.
Wow, I appreciate you dressing up and showering and shaving for the show.
No.
That means a lot.
A black t-shirt and jeans was, to me, the most common form of dress at conventions.
Yep.
You know what this reminds me of? Kenneth just said, is it the evil doppelganger or maybe the good doppelganger? Remember that Simpsons episode where Bart had an evil twin, born with an evil twin? I think it was a Halloween. Huh?
And Bart turns out to be the evil twin.
Yeah, they locked
the good twin.
Yeah, they locked the wrong one in the attic. Bart was the evil twin. I love those Simpsons Halloween shows.
If we wanted to have a sinister explanation for the appearance of your double, you could always claim that it was a guy trying to get into the convention by pretending he lost his badge and was impersonating you.
That would work because I rarely wear my badge at conventions. I don't like hanging it around my neck.
So many years ago, I was on jury duty, and just before we were supposed to leave for lunch, they had one of the guards come over and said, listen, before you guys go anywhere, you need to take your badges off as soon as you leave the building.
Okay.
And you're like, what? And they're like, your badge has your name on it.
Yeah.
It makes you
Okay.
a target.
Yeah.
Some guy will come up to you and say, "Hey, Pete, how you doing?" And while you're distracted trying to figure out who this guy is, he's already walked away with your wallet.
Right.
Well, this whole doppelganger thing is weird, and it actually is even weirder because, as you guys know, I'm really interested in doppelganger stories.
You are.
Lake Mungo, Paul Trimbley's disappearance at Devil's Rock, and many, many others, you know. So anyway, it's strange.
So
Hey,
if everything goes right, I'm gonna go to the film festival this year.
Oh, Pete,
Yeah,
I'll
big.
see you there because I am planning to go to that if they have it. I'm convention starved.
Yeah, I am too. Yeah, that's a big if, though, isn't it?
They're gonna. It looks like I'm going back to work on June 1st. They're gonna open us back up. So
Wait a minute. What year is this? 21? Are you talking about Necronomicon?
no, the film festival.
Film festival. In which city? Portland or Portland? Okay.
Yeah, it's due to be in October.
Yeah,
I've
I hope
penciled
so.
for the time off.
me too. So, and I should have a novella to put out.
Oh, that'd be great.
So,
Is that the one that you were talking about? That series with the nice pictures, the
no,
covers? No.
Is this the
Oh,
romantic comedy you're working
it
on?
is. It's a romantic comedy.
Figured. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, guys, Rick, did you know this? There's a new book called Illyria, and it's written by the principal in Buffy, the Vampire Slayer.
Oh, the guy who played Quark on.
Armin Shimmerman or something like
Yeah,
that.
he was Quark on. Deep Space
on
Nine.
Deep Space Nine. Yeah, it has nothing to do with the series. I think it's Shakespearean comedy of some kind of, but it's still funny. So,
I got something.
Yeah.
Solomon Kane, the role-playing game, is now out.
Ooh.
Which, if you
where'd
buy
get-
it, I was in the Kickstarter for it. The box, which has the rules, is going to be a pain to lift because they have these heavy binders. Right here. Now, I'm not going to, you get great artwork.
Yeah, the
See if
art
we
for
can-
RPGs these days is amazing.
And I'm showing you the figures as they're photographed.
Nice.
You see Solomon Kane is the second one from,
Yeah,
I guess,
with
the
the
left here.
Nice.
So they're very well made. They have scenarios based on most of the short stories and fragments, but they're releasing it in 2 waves because it was too much to produce. So you get all like the English adventures in the first wave, and in the second wave you get the African adventures.
Let's see, how much time is 18 days to go. Okay, this is kind of interesting. You guys remember Jed Shepard, the guy who directed Host, right?
Yeah.
Very popular pandemic Zoom movie. Interviewed him right after it came out, him and most of the ladies on the show, which was weird, on Zoom. And Trevor Henderson, who I've had on the show before, who's really gained a lot of fans in the last year. He's an artist. Just Google him and you'll see why people love his horror art so well. Anyway, Trevor's going to be on the show on June 13th. And Trevor just emailed me back. I emailed both of them and I said, looks like you guys are doing a cool project together. Jed, would you like to join us that day? And Jed says, only if Trevor wants me to. Don't want to steal any of his much deserved spotlight. And Trevor's like, of course, that'd be rad. That's a direct quote. All right, so what they're doing is something called Ghosts. Trevor Henderson shares first, this is on Bloody Disgusting. Trevor Henderson shares first look at the unsettling Long Lady. This is a character he's created from the upcoming real-time live-action horror game. I don't pretend to understand what that is, but I will by the time I have them on the show. But it looks really, really cool, and they're being funded through Kickstarter. Looks like they're asking for, I can't imagine these guys, they're pretty popular not making it. Oh yeah, they've already made it, sorry. 18 days to go. There's a lot of cool swag on this project. So Google Jed Shepard Ghosts Kickstarter, you'll probably come to it, and they can tell us all about it. Let me just read this from Bloody Disgusting. The game takes inspiration from the works of Manx screenwriter Nigel Neal, am I saying his name right? And the blurring of fact and fiction from the found footage movies of the last 25 years. However, unlike previous games in this oft-forgotten genre, we're creating a horror experience that aims to truly chill your blood and send full-motion video games streaming into the modern day. I can't picture in my mind exactly how this game will work, but I'm sure they'll explain it to us. So
Nigel,
these are two very cool guys. They're two very talented guys.
Nigel Neal did the Quatermass movies.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So if you're interested in getting in on that, check that Kickstarter out, and we'll have both of these guys on June the 13th. So
the game probably has alien invaders of some sort, which may have landed on Earth in prehistoric times.
yeah, I mean, guess we'll just have to ask them. I mean, I can vaguely see the outlines of how the game works, but not really. I don't really understand the mechanics. My son's probably listening to this and going, "Oh my God, he's old." And my wife too. What else do we have? Oh, I was just going to ask you guys what you're reading and watching, and then that's all I have for today, pretty much. Anything, Bueller?
Yep, I am reading Aftermath of an Industrial Accident,
Oh yeah.
which by Mike Allen. About halfway through, there's a collection of short stories and poetry. Really good. It's got an intro by Jeff Thomas.
Who?
I don't know, some guy named Jeff Thomas.
Okay, well, I'll check him out.
Yeah, and I'm basking in the afterglow of great reviews for my new book, the Book of Yig.
Okay, so Pete, that
You
is
look
actually
fast.
that was the book I was going to mention.
Okay.
'Cause my copy just came in the mail, and so that's what I'm starting tonight.
Who published this? How come I don't have a copy?
I don't know why you don't have a copy. It's Crossroads Press.
Oh, those are the same guys that did Laurel Hightower's books. Same lady, I mean, right?
Yeah,
Or no, the name of the book was Crossroads. Never mind.
the imprint is Macabre Inc.
Okay. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
they're. But yeah.
Great cover, though. I gotta say, it's really.
Yeah, we went round and round on that for a long time.
Do you have it in front of you? The cover?
I can.
For those who are watching, I mean. And tell us what the book is about too, please. And Pete, while you're reaching for that book, I just want to say I've been thinking the entire episode, man, Pete looks basked, All right. Tough room.
All right. Well, it's about 250 pages, I think.
Yeah,
So
Matt, you have it?
That's a
Yeah,
dad
let
joke,
me-
and I've told that joke many times. What's the book about? 500 pages.
Let me go grab it. Sorry.
For God's sake, you guys. I'm so sorry, people.
Yeah, we suck. Yeah,
Did it just come out this week or what?
I've had copies for a few weeks, but it just came out last week.
Just came out last week. Okay.
Huh. I don't have a copy on my swag shelf. Son of a nutcracker.
Well, why don't you come back and tell us what it's about then?
So it is a collection of of novellas, really. I think there's 4 or 5.
Okay, here
go
it
ahead.
is. It's absolutely, I think this is striking, very different and gorgeous cover art.
I wouldn't pass that on a shelf or a virtual shelf. That's
Yeah,
cool.
Apparently I did.
Yeah, you should buy a copy of that, Pete. Looks good.
Yeah.
I don't know who the artist was, though.
I'm woefully unprepared for this.
Well, can you tell us what it's about, or do you not remember?
So it's a collection of novellas.
Sorry.
Dealing one of and they are basically, Matt, is there 4 or 5? I've lost count.
4, right?
4?
1, 2,
Matt,
3,
tell
4,
Pete
5.
about his book.
There are 5 of them.
5. Yeah, see, I knew there were 5.
David Hambling, Matthew Davenport, Mark Howard Jones.
Oh, it's not all you.
Hambling
I thought it was all you, Pete.
No.
And
Oh, okay.
Percival Rawlick.
I thought it was a collection. It's an
No, it's a
anthology.
collection of novellas, and they're set in each of our individual universes, but they're linked together, and they all deal with the various facets and factions involving the serpent god Yig.
Okay.
And I got approached to do this by David Hambling, who writes some really great mythos novels set in Victorian England.
Those are the Harry
Stubbs.
Yeah, those are actually quite a lot of fun.
They are.
Yig is a very, very misunderstood guy, I feel.
Who?
Yig.
Yig, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's just trying to protect his children.
Yes, absolutely. So
That's right.
So yeah, we got together and we all wrote little novellas, and then we shared ideas back and forth, so we were able to link them all together. And I did something I didn't. What are you laughing at, Davis?
Chelsea Goodwin just wrote "Get Yiggy with it." That's so bad and so funny.
I'm not coming on this show anymore.
Thanks, Chelsea.
I'm really upset that she would steal my joke.
Yeah. Before you thought of it.
Right. Come on, Chelsea. I'm the joker.
This is incentive for you to stay on the show, Pete.
So anyway, where Hambling wrote a Harry Stubbs novella, and Davenport wrote a Andrew Fellon story. I did something I didn't think I was going to do. I wrote a Peasley story, a Wingate Peasley story.
That's shocking.
More Peasley?
More Peasley.
I'm shocked. Yeah.
Peasley and Yig?
Yep, Peasley and Yig. So,
Yeah. Well, you had written a sort of a Peasley and Yig story a long time ago.
I did. This is a further exploration.
This is probably a more modern take, because the other one was set in really ancient times.
That is, you are correct, sir. But yes, this one is set in the 60s, maybe 50s. I can't remember. Yes. And it deals with the Cold War and Nazis and early American listening posts.
So where can we buy the Book of Yig?
Amazon.
All right.
Where all things go to be sold.
A Kindle edition is $2.99.
And the paperback
you
is
can't beat that.
$17.99.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you want signed copies, Facebook message me and I'll figure something out.
If you want signed copies, I'll buy the book and then sign it and send it at double the price if anybody wants me to sign it. I'm not in the book, but
what I'm gonna have to do is carry this book somewhere for Pete to sign, because I'm not buying 2 copies. I do that too often.
All right.
Yes.
I've got an announcement to make. Several announcements. Okay. Our next Quiet Horror will be on, I think it's May the 4th. We had to postpone it a couple of Tuesdays, but I think that's 2 Tuesdays from this Tuesday, whatever. I'll announce it. All right. This Tuesday, since we couldn't do Quiet Horror, I'm trying something new. It's called a YouTube premiere. And what it is you can watch a video at the same time, not in the manner of cast, Matthew, something different. So basically, I'll link to this in my social media, Twitter, Facebook. Actually, I will put the link on the side here right now as I'm talking, if I can do 2 things at once, which I usually can't. And what we're going to do first is, this first time, is listen to an audio drama from the Nightfall, Canadian series Nightfall, which was very, very good. And it's a story called In the Name of the Father. And it's very Shadow over Innsmouth. It's a very, very good story. It's not a reading, it's an audio drama. You guys know how much I love those. So basically, we can listen to this audio drama, and it'll look pretty much like you're watching the show. If you're watching the show on YouTube right now and comment on the side, it's going to be pretty much that same thing. We'll be listening to the audio drama all at the same time, and we can text comment on the side. And that'll be Tuesday at 9 Eastern, 8 Central. So I hope that this is something that everybody enjoys. I just want to get a little audio drama out there because I love it so much. So what are you laughing at, Carpenter?
I just sometimes think funny things.
Oh, did you tell yourself a joke?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
I have to laugh. Nobody else does.
no, I've got
That's
to tell
true.
you, I use your dad jokes every day. And sometimes I get laughs and sometimes I get things thrown at me.
I did. Danielle's done this too. Go through Matt Carpenter's Facebook page and just keep scrolling down. And after a while, I just get the belly laughs. Because,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Your resistance gets beaten down.
it does.
It does.
Yeah. So, all right. Next week, Bo Johnson. Written several books, 2 books at least. All of them to burn and a better kind of hate. So, obviously romantic comedies. And then after that, I'm trying to sprinkle in more non-guest episodes just so that we can, I think the audience enjoys the guests a lot, but they also enjoy when we don't have a guest. So I'm trying to do 3 out of 4 episodes, do it that way. Matt, the prize again is
issue number 9 of Weird Fiction Review from Centipede Press. This is a new copy, still shrink wrapped. Just send an email to ezineprizes@gmail.com and put review in the subject heading, and you'll be entered into the drawing.
All right. Got 2 more days on the Lovecraftian / cosmic horror 2-line horror sentence contest. Some of them are really dumb, and then several of them are really good. So you're judging that, right, Matt? Like if you're in the middle of work or something and one comes across.
Generally, I'm judging you generally and most of the panelists, but nothing specific. No.
I've seen probably, I got to go over it really well on Tuesday, the 20th, but
I thought
I've seen like 3 that are really, really good.
Weren't you judging it, Pete? I mean, I
think we're all judging it together.
I was sort of abrogating my responsibility.
I'm very judgmental. We're just reading these on Facebook, right? There's no.
No, it's on the Lovecraft eZine website.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought.
They're commenting there. So
all right.
Just go to lovecraftezine.com. Okay, that's all I got. Unless anybody wants to plug anything else. No? All right. Well, I sent this to my patrons the other day. Thanks to the patrons. Please do not ever doubt at all that
We love you.
we do love you. We do love you. We all love you. But there would not be a show. There would not be any of the eZine projects, anything. It would all grind to a halt without the patrons. So I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate it very much. And for those at the 25 and level and up, Matt has just sent a shitload of really cool stuff. So thank you, Matt. Appreciate that.
It's quite eclectic. It's what's on the shelf. You get what you get. Okay.
And you don't throw a fit.
Right.
If it comes from Matt Carpenter, it's typically pretty cool. Like the prize for the 2-line Lovecraftian horror contest.
Oh, a copy of Revival, the limited edition. So I guess
with art, still shrink wrap,
because the prize is superb.
Yeah, we got to really judge this. It's no joke. This is one hell of a prize. It's going for like what, $250 on Abe Books.
Yeah, something like that.
And it's got interior illustrations and everything. I mean, I want to win it. So
I thought I already decided that I won, but okay.
You have 2 copies.
Oh.
Yeah,
which I don't know why you have 2 copies, but
well, Matt, if you have,
This is typical stupid shit that happens when something first comes out and I jump on the bandwagon and I order it. I don't keep records. A year and a half later, someone says, "Oh, there's this new book by edition of Revival coming out. You should buy a copy." So I say, "Yeah, I should," and I order a copy, and then like a year and a half
Isabel
later,
just
they
loves
say,
this.
"Look, this is now coming out. Don't miss out. It's the last couple copies." I'll say, "Oh my God, I better get a copy."
Your wife just loves this, doesn't she?
I'm trying for her not to find out as much as she can.
But she probably loves me right now because we shifted temporarily until you get rid of a lot of books, because you've been trying to get rid of a lot of books, that Matt's given away the book prizes and swag prizes and so forth to the patrons at that level. So Isabel's got to be like, wow, this is great.
You reach a point as a collector when you don't know what you have anymore.
I'm way past that. What I'm doing though is I'm giving away old Lovecraftian books where I know I have duplicates, but I'm also digging through general horror books where I figure I'm never going to go and read them again.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, thank you guys for being here today. Pete, thanks for the help with the interview, and Matt and Rick. And if that's everything, then I guess we will see everybody next week. Thanks, guys, for listening, for watching. And next week, Bo Johnson. Thanks.